We are back on MorningLine. Thanks for joining us on this Thursday. We're talking about your memory. You remember what the show's about? Vanderbilt Center for Cognitive Medicine does some great work over there. Dr. Paul Newhouse is joining us this morning. And doctor, is it pretty much a given, though? You made a good example in our last segment about as we all age, our joints get a little creaky, hair turns a bit gray. Is it a given that as we all age to some degree with everything else, our brain also might slow down a little bit, or is that not necessarily the case?
I don't think it's necessarily the case, Nick. We have good evidence that there are many people who don't seem to experience much change at all in their memory or cognitive abilities as they age. They may not be as rapid or as fast as they used to be. Just like I can't run 100 meters as fast as I probably could when I was 20. But for many people, they do retain their faculties really all the way up to the end of their life. And so we've increasingly concluded that losing one's memory is not normal in aging.
Gotcha. Okay, listen, we've got some phone calls we're going to take. We'll squeeze one in here, and I've got a lot of other questions for you. Folks, you can join us, 737-7587. James, good morning, James.
Good morning. How are you guys?
Good. What's on your mind, buddy?
I went through this with a family member, and God, she was a wonderful person, but at times she would revert back to her young age, and a doctor I knew told me this is the only way you're ever going to be able to keep her with you for longer periods of time is lie to her. Tell her something you know and she knows is a lie and let her catch you in it. And give her garlic and a few other herbs. And I was told that THC, marijuana, did help Alzheimer's. I don't know that that's true.
Okay, we hit on a bunch of points there. And Doc, what do you think? He talked about garlic and marijuana, and I guess that segues us into some of what you can do to try to help your memory. What do you think?
Well, we don't think that herbs are particularly helpful for memory. They may be good for cooking, but at this point, we haven't identified any so-called natural remedies or herbs that are particularly helpful. Regarding THC or marijuana, there are studies ongoing in terms of using marijuana derivatives to see if they're helpful, mainly for the anxiety or the agitation that can sometimes accompany late-stage Alzheimer's disease. One of my colleagues in South Carolina is leading that study. But at this point, we don't recommend THC or cannabis or any of these cannabis oil or anything like that for Alzheimer's disease.
Okay. And I guess, again, memory loss, several things can cause it. You hear a lot of talk about how with some folks, it's blood flow or whatever the case is. I had a brother-in-law where he had heart disease and elsewhere, hardening of the arteries, and that contributed to his issue. I mean, you want to have a healthy flow of blood to your brain, right? And if that's constricted or an issue, that's a problem, right?
Absolutely. So what's good for the heart is good for the brain. And we know that if there are damage to blood vessels in the brain, that can lead to memory and cognitive problems as well. And so absolutely, we think that cardiovascular health is very important for long-term memory health as well.
I think last time you were on this program with me, we talked about one of the studies being done over there at the Cognitive Medicine Center at Vanderbilt, and you were talking about nicotine. And when people hear the word nicotine, they think, well, that is the addictive substance that's in cigarettes, or that's how it's perceived, and the concern that it causes cancer. I remember actually looking into some of this about maybe it could help my folks, since they're losing it. You want to tell us a little bit about memory loss and the connection of nicotine and how and when maybe it's appropriate for some people? I assume you're not telling people to start smoking. That's not it. Okay.
That's quite correct. Yes.
All right.
Right. So nicotine, as we know, is derived from plants. It's obviously mostly in the tobacco plant, but it's also present in tomatoes and eggplants, and many other plants have nicotine in their leaves. Nicotine is a naturally occurring substance, and like many plant derivatives where we get medicines from, it interacts with our brains. And so we discovered actually over 100 years ago that nicotine could stimulate nerve cells in a very specific way. It does this through what we call receptors, which are the signaling part of nerve cells. And we have been studying the effects of nicotine on specific brain circuits now for many years. My work with nicotine actually goes back to the early 1980s, if you can remember that back that far, Nick.
Yeah.
And what we now know is that nicotine can actually activate and change certain brain circuits, which are important for memory and mood and other normal functions. And we've been studying the effects of nicotine on memory loss now for several years, and we're embarked on a very large national study to see if this could be helpful.
So my question is, and I know it's been going on for a while, is it at this point a standard method of treatment, or is it still at such a stage where we just don't know for sure? I mean, are you treating patients with this yet as an accepted form of treatment?
So this is not FDA approved for standard treatment yet. We are still studying it. We've been conducting this national trial now for several years. Of course, the COVID pandemic really put the kibosh on all sorts of national trials, including this one. But we're back up and running and hoping to complete the trial in the next few years to see if we can document that nicotine, given via the skin, can really benefit people with early memory loss.
Okay, I want to talk more about this. We'll take a break and come back when you talk about the skin, the nicotine patches, which we hear about, which smokers will use to try to wean themselves off of cigarettes. So
that's right.
We'll talk a bit about that and you know, where it's going with that, as well as we go through the program here with 2 more segments. Other things you can do to strengthen your brain. We'll take a break. Be back with The Good Doctor right after this.